On Tuesday, the Supreme Court handed down an order allowing Texas's controversial state immigration law to go into effect. But it was only in effect for about 8 hours as the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals paused the law later the same day. The law, known as SB4, would make it a state crime for migrants to cross into the United States through Texas without legal documentation. It would allow Texas officials to arrest, detain, and deport undocumented individuals. Texas is claiming that it should be able to enforce the law under the state war clause, arguing that their state is experiencing what it considers to be an invasion, which qualifies it to engage in wartime activity. Texas's Attorney General Ken Paxton said in court papers that, quote, the Constitution recognizes that Texas has the sovereign right to defend itself from nonviolent transnational cartels that flood the state with fentanyl, weapons, and all manner of brutality, end quote. But the law violates at least 150 years of precedent from an 1875 Supreme Court opinion that says, quote, the authority to control immigration is vested solely in the federal government. In her dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, joined by Justice Jackson, said, quote, today the court invites further chaos and crisis in immigration enforcement. Texas passed a law that directly regulates the entry and removal of non-citizens and explicitly instructs its state courts to disregard any ongoing federal immigration proceedings. That law upends the federal-state balance of power that has existed for over a century, in which the national government has had exclusive authority over entry and removal of non-citizens, end quote. The Mexican Foreign Ministry put out a statement condemning SB4, warning Texas that, quote, Mexico will not accept under any circumstances repatriations by the state of Texas, end quote. Now, there are many reasons why individual states in the United States and in other countries cannot and should not take control of immigration. For one, in this case, Mexico and Canada and really any other country in the world would have to negotiate with each individual state. Each state would have different laws, different immigration enforcement agencies. It could hypothetically lead to border patrol between each state in the U.S. The fact that Texas shares a border with Mexico is incidental in the case of the law. It does not give it more power than a state like Kansas or anywhere else. While it's not likely the bill will be allowed to go into effect, it signifies an attempt by red states to strong-arm the Biden administration and to show, even just symbolically, Republicans' hardline anti-immigration point of view. Joining me now is the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter and staff writer for The Atlantic, Caitlin Dickerson, and Alan Orr, immigration attorney and former president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here. Caitlin, I think, you and I have talked about this before, but I think we have to underscore this. There are valid reasons that are not political why countries control immigration and negotiate these things with each other, and not subnational entities like states.
Just as you just finished saying a moment ago, Ali, that's right. Immigration requires international diplomacy, which is not something that states do. That's not how our country has been set up. But the fact that there is no precedent for states enforcing immigration law doesn't really seem to matter because of the way that Donald Trump has changed the makeup of so many different courts, including, of course, the Supreme Court. And so it should be no surprise that we're in many ways in uncharted territory right now. I mean, I think what this news tells us more than anything is that this national period of backlash against immigrants is now bigger than Donald Trump. He saw an opportunity and seized it when he was looking at people who were very concerned about conspiracy theories, great replacement, et cetera. But many other members of the Republican Party have now joined on the bandwagon. And as with past moments and movements against immigrants, the facts don't seem to matter. We've all seen headlines recently about how well the American economy is doing because of immigration, and that doesn't seem to be part of the debate at all.
Alan, a lot of people were surprised by the Supreme Court's take on this whole thing. I want to be really clear, though, and I think you want to make this point, and that is that the Supreme Court did not say that Ken Paxton and Texas's take on this thing is valid on the merits. The Supreme Court allowing this to be stayed, removing the stay, was not about that. It was a more procedural matter than that.
That's right. That's right. There was no education or evaluation of the merits of the underlying argument that Texas had the right to sort of do this, because Texas does not issue passports, nor does it enter into any treaties with countries which would allow it to remove people from the United States. I think it's important to note that Texas has been pushing and pushing and pushing against the federal government with regards to this regulations towards the executive branch. It's really Congress that needs to act to change the laws with regards to immigration. And that's pretty much what was addressed in the dissent, of saying the disarray that would happen if any state was able to sort of make this haphazardly. And we've seen two presidents, both President Trump and a President Biden, try to address immigration. And without Congress helping them, everything they do will fail.
Caitlin, I want to ask you about where this goes from here, because obviously it would be precedent-setting if the Supreme Court were to opine on this, on the merits. The Supreme Court has done this. In 2012 in Arizona, this came up. I can't remember the name of what that bill was called. Show me your papers. That's right. It has happened before, and the Supreme Court has said, very clear, the federal authority over immigration is well established. What's your sense of how this unfolds, given that?
I think this movement is going to keep going. I think that more states will jump on the bandwagon. And I also think that we will continue to see the Republican Party take the same approach to immigration enforcement that the Trump administration did, the throw spaghetti to the wall and see what sticks approach. So if you recall, so many of that administration's policies ended up tied up in court and were ultimately blocked. But that didn't matter. You know, the administration knew going into implementing these laws that a lot of them wouldn't succeed, but they felt it was in their best interest to try to chip away at immigration on the margins as much as they could. And as I said, I think that the Republican Party is really taking what they view as Donald Trump's success on immigration and running with it.
The success on immigration, by the way, is the fact that the immigration issue is not getting solved. That's more successful in the eyes of some Americans than actually solving it. Let's talk about that after a break. Caitlin Dickerson and Alan Orr, stay with me. We'll be right back.